So thank you again. All right. Are we on? Okay, let's begin. Tonight's a very timely book. Somebody I spent last week in Death Valley, and amongst the beautiful things that I experienced was the beauty of silence and having everything turn off in your mind, in your ears. You can hear somebody walking like a half a mile away in the dirt, but that's all you can hear. It's quite, as you all know, invigorating, but it calms your mind down, and something that our kids definitely could use is a calmer mind. So we're very pleased. I'm gonna defer the introductions, but before we do, to let somebody properly handle it. Before we do, tonight is, of course, also a fundraiser for the Wilderness Youth Project. So from 5:30 to 7:30, 10% of whatever we sell, including the guy who bought $200 worth of art books just a few minutes ago and had never heard of the Wilderness Youth Project. He might come back though, so keep an eye out for him. But anything will go to the Wilderness Youth Project. And to talk more about that, as well as to introduce our speaker, please welcome the program director of the WYP, Sharon Buchacher.
Thanks all, glad you're here. As Michael said, my name's Sharon, I'm the program director at Wilderness Youth Project, and we are a local organization here in town. Been here for about 26 years, and our mission is really about connection and relationship, and we do that by taking children outside and reminding all of us just how connected we are. And hi, Emma. And the beauty that can happen when everybody remembers that I am connected to you and you are connected to this and we are connected to this tree. And what happens? What magic happens and what kindness evolves when that takes place. And I'm so thrilled. First I'm thrilled to be at Chaucer's. And I just want to give a yay to Chaucer's. He's been in this community as an independent bookstore forever and has been a mainstay, and has just been able to stay here despite other forces that are trying to eke independent bookstores out. So thank you to Chaucer's. And I am so thrilled about this book. I've known Kathleen for almost 26 years, probably, almost since Wilderness Youth Project has been around. And I feel like you have been writing this book for that long and maybe longer. And I got to like 3/4 through, and then I skimmed the last quarter, and I asked myself, like, if I had to describe this book to somebody, what would I say? And the words that came was that this book is a guide for honoring our curious humanity, so we can stay connected to life. And it's so simple. What the stories in here and the practices that Kathleen offers are so simple, and yet there are forces every single day that are pulling us like away. No, don't stay connected. Come over here and disconnect. And this book just brings us right back into how simple it can be to find connection. I'm thrilled that there's a resource for that. Kathleen is, there's a couple things I want to say about Kathleen, and then we're going to let her tell us some stories. She just became an approved provider for continuing education with the American Occupational Therapy Association, which is no small feat. She's an incredible naturalist. She helped start Outside Now, which is a sister organization like Wilderness Youth Project that's up in San Luis Obispo. She is an incredible parent to 2 adult humans, one of which is here tonight. And above all, you can count on Kathleen to tell it like it is. She is just the person that you can say, what do you think about this? And she's going to tell you exactly what she thinks. She, in the best way. And she is willing and able to embrace her own failures and her own flaws. And she is the first to embrace mine. And all of yours. And I think that tenderness and how she approaches life is what makes this just so beautiful. So, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm really glad you spoke about the simplicity, because it truly has taken me that long to write the book, because that's what I really wanted to do. I there's all this knowledge and science and experience that I've had over the last 30 years as an occupational therapist, and I didn't want to take all that and just hand parents and mentors another list of things that they felt like they had to do or that they were failing at. I wanted it to feel like, oh, I can do that, and to remind people that it can be really simple. But before I talk too much about that, I do want to share a little bit of gratitude. 30 years ago, almost to the day, I stood in Chaucer's, and it was my first trip to California. I'm a Northeast girl, and I was driving up the coast by myself, and I'm a bit of an introverted extrovert, and so to get comfortable when I travel, I find the independent bookstores. And so I found Chaucer's, and I was standing in this store, and there was something about it that I had this thought, and I said, I want to have a book here someday. And it felt like a totally impossible dream. I had no idea how to write a book. I wasn't going to school for, writing. I was going to school for OT, occupational therapy. And so, I want to thank Sharon for helping make that dream come true. And Lauren for all the work you did too, and Wilderness Youth Project. And for Chaucer's for having authors here still, and all this. Don't you wish we were on Zoom doing this? I'm so glad that you're still doing these in-person events. It feels so much more connective, and I also want to thank my daughter, who's here standing in the back, my older daughter, and my younger daughter, who's in Colorado living her best life with very little snow right now. I don't know if you've heard, but and for their instigation of this book. They're the ones who helped really form what became While Inside, and all of the hundreds, maybe thousands of kids I've worked with over the last 30 years. So big gratitude to those teachers and the natural world, who has been my driving force in life for not just working with all the kids and all the beautiful people that I've gotten to meet over the course of that time, but who's really guided all the things that I've learned. And the science and the education really just felt like validation for what the natural world was already sharing and helping me tune into. So only a couple of short, very, very short years after I stood in Chaucer's, I discovered that I was having a baby. And it was a bit of a surprise. And at that point, I knew enough to know that there was a lot I didn't know about raising a skillful human. And so I started to gather books, parenting books and child development books, and reading all that I could. And as I watched these books kind of stack up on the floor, I realized that they all felt like they were missing something for me. What I was longing for, I was just deeply longing to find a book that spoke to my experience, which felt like I wasn't just looking for a parenting book, like a how to train your baby to do this or that, or, you know, schedule them for this, or make sure they make their milestones, but how to have this parenting experience and sort yourself out while you're raising a human being. And I couldn't find that book. And so then I had this beautiful being that sometimes I couldn't stop looking at because I was amazed by her, but I was also overwhelmed. And she was born on Christmas Day in a snowstorm. And about 5 months later, we had this amazingly warm spring day. And I stepped outside with her. You know, I probably hadn't brushed my hair in that 5 months. And I stepped outside, and she was on my hip, and she was a super cherubby baby. And the wind kicked up, and it hit me in the face, and it hit her in the face. And when it did that, she just turned her whole body into that wind, and she went, and when she did that, I like totally laughed, and she looked at me, and then she looked back at the wind, and she did it again. And then I laughed, and she looked back at me. And so when I laughed again, she looked and did that again to the wind. And there was this amazing, beautiful dance that happened with her moving to the wind hitting her face, her looking at me looking at her going back. And it was like just this reciprocal, beautiful exchange. And in that moment, it was like everything else fell away. And I just felt the essence of what I was longing for. It didn't matter what any book said. I was like, this is it right here. There's something here. And so I searched, what is that? And for years I searched, what is that? What was that moment? And through that, I met amazing humans doing amazing work in the nature connection field. And I also discovered science of child development called the serve and return interaction. And that is how our brains are structured, through exactly a child looking to their caregiver and saying, essentially, is this moment or thing important? And the caregiver responding or not, sending a message that yes, that's important, or no, it's not.
It's time to go.
And so I was like, that is what happened between my daughter and the wind too. So we can extend that further. That's a 1,000,000-year-old technology that our children come with. And so that really helped me begin writing this book. And then years later, when I really sat down and started actually typing words on the pages, I wrote it and scrapped it and wrote it and scrapped it, because people were telling me, I would talk with editors and they would say, you can't do this. You can't write yourself into this story. You're a professional. You have to write the science. You have to, cite the work. You have to do this and that. And I was like, but that's kind of what's wrong with things these days, is this fracturing of our society. And when I remove myself from the story, one, it doesn't feel true anymore, because I'm not telling the parts of me that I had to sort out, that I had to heal, all the childhood adversity I had to work through as I was figuring out how to skillfully raise a human, and sometimes and often unskillfully, and then how to repair that too. But also, there wasn't a lot of science that really spoke to that interaction between our neurology and the natural world. There's a lot of sensory science in this, but it didn't speak to that emotional piece either. But when I walk outside, or when I watch children walk outside, it's really obvious, isn't it? Are there any parents here? And have you seen that moment? Yeah, it's pretty obvious, right? So there's a lot of science I could get into, but I do want to read from Wild Inside because I'm here and I get to do that. Right? And I do want to have a little bit of a discussion if you guys are up for that tonight. So if you're ready, I'm ready. And I was really glad when you said you didn't read the last part, because in So my older daughter back here, she's always been a lovely and unique human, and yeah, I'm talking about you, Beta. But one thing that she did that was so unique was when she was younger, she would always read the last chapter of books first. And I was mortified. I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, well, if something happens and I can't read the rest of the book, at least I know what happened. So I thought, if anybody here ends up not reading the book, I kind of want you to know what happened. But I do hope you read it. So, settle in a little bit here. So this chapter is called In the Hands of Our Next Generations, Crossing the Bridge Together. Raising children who know how to find their way back to meaning when life gets messy is among the greatest gifts we can give the future. It is the hope that they will see themselves as part of something larger, woven into the fabric of life, rooted in the earth, in each other, and in something wild inside. In every small interaction, a hand on the shoulder, a murmured, "I'm here," a shared sighting of a hawk, we offer one another the stability that modern life too often strips away. We can't eliminate adversity, but we can offer a compass through it. And nature can hold that compass when we've lost our way. I invite you to take a moment here and remember a time when you were a child in nature, a time when you felt joyful, excited, alive. Picture that moment. If you could get back to that, would you? This is a moment in this chapter that my daughter helped me get back to that, and reminded me that sometimes all we have to do, and often all we have to do, is really let nature lead our children and follow them back. So she was 8. I'd been trying to persuade her to help me plant our garden. Unsuccessful, I loosened soil and planted seeds until she shouted, "Mama, come over here." I looked to see her leaning over, almost into an old water trough. I'd been trying to motivate her to share in the work of our garden. "Come on, honey, we might find worms, and won't it be fun when we can just walk out here and eat sugar peas?" I wanted to teach her about growing food and the cycles of life and death. I wanted to teach her about the interaction of insects and plants, about how different plants need different amounts of light and water and nutrients, and how the same plant will grow differently depending on where it grows. I'd given up cajoling her when she implored me again, "Mama!" She said it exactly like that too, by the way. I put down my shovel and went to see what had her attention. I sat down beside her. The wind tugged at the brim of my hat as a ray of sun penetrated green algae on the water's surface. Staring into the water, we watched as a dragonfly nymph emerged, dragging its tiny waterlogged body to rest 8 inches above the water's edge. There, it began a slow and laborious process of shedding its muted gray shell. My daughter and I huddled close in silence, as if attending a church sermon. Her body remained still, her eyes wide, her hair whipped and tangled around her face in the wind. Every few moments, she cast her eyes in my direction, beckoning me to stay with her, to be still and wait. I studied the face that so many say looks like mine, her high freckled cheekbones, her blue eyes, her fine sandy-colored hair. I'm often drawn in by her reverence for life, and now by her attention to this dragonfly. People who didn't really know my daughter said things like, "She's so sensitive," as if sensitive is bad. "She's a difficult child, isn't she?" as if to mean that easier is better. "Wow, she's intense," as if she should be more demure. "Your daughter literally stared me down today," as if curious eyes are threatening. I'm actually afraid of your daughter, a friend laughed as she said this. It's true. People often saw my daughter in that way. When she was a toddler, she growled at people who got too close. She refused to talk to certain adults, but was insanely chatty with others. She never wanted to sleep alone. Whenever we went on a trip, she threw up before we left. Her version of cuddling at night was frequently, lie as close to me as you can, but don't touch me. And in her nursing years, she was like a third appendage. But there at the rusty water trough, she was confident, present, calm, wise. There, she was the curious, kind, wide-eyed observer I still had to force myself to stop looking at in amazement so I could do something productive. And I wonder, when did being present for and sitting with a child come to be seen as an unproductive waste of time? That dragonfly moment lasted an entire hour as we kept our steady, quiet focus. When the creature finally freed itself from the hard, ugly shell keeping it alive underwater for the past 5 or so years, we made slack-jawed, soft gasps. Long, wobbly legs walked it to the top edge of the metal trough, and there it stood in stillness, with its wings spread, waving them in slow motion up and down to feel the newness of sensation wings must give to a bat. Still trying to teach, I said, "Wow, no mother, no father. How does it know what to do?" She responded in a hushed tone, as if her heart was speaking out loud. "Mama, maybe, just maybe, she dreams a dream her whole life, until one day she wakes up and just knows what to do." My response, "Maybe," was thick and drawn, like honey from a honeycomb. The dragonfly stretched out its wings further, and my daughter straightened her backbone, mirroring the dragonfly's movement. When the insect seemed satisfied that its new skin was formed and dry, it lifted off for its first glorious flight. We held our breath. But the very moment the dragonfly launched into the air, a violent gust of wind slammed it back onto the surface of the water. Dismay and shock froze me, but not my daughter. Swiftly, she placed her hand under the water and lifted the dragonfly out, using her body to shield it from the wind. She held her hand steady while the insect dried its new wings again. Thus fortified, the dragonfly lifted once more, this time successfully, into the spring wind. Every child comes with a dream. Call it an internal compass, a spark of personality, a neural template formed by evolution. Their environment either activates or suppresses that dream. And through ecoception, that serve and return, that dance with the wind and my daughter and myself, their sensory dialogue with the natural world, they can engage in ways that carry their development forward. And we as caregivers, we can help or hinder that process. We can either make the soil fertile or deny the roots what they need. Thanks for listening to that. I learn so much from that story every time I think about it. And that's the beauty of the natural world and letting nature lead our kids and getting out of the way. I have so many more stories of kids I've worked with and my kids too, and my own stories, but I wonder if, as I was reading that, if anyone had a story come to mind that jumped out of an experience you had with a child like that, or even your own experience as a child. to share a little story?
I'll share something. I'm a assistant director at the Oaks Parent Child Workshop, so just down the street, and we're 2.5 to 5 year olds. We're an outdoor nature-based school with a lot of parent involvement, and right now we have a child who's 5 who has so much knowledge on bugs and just all kinds of insects, and he's always teaching all of the other kids, all of the adults about like what the exact name of this caterpillar is, and he'll like we now have a dedicated basket of like insect guides and binoculars and cameras and all this stuff for the kids, and they have it out every day, and they're collecting the slugs and the worms and making like little bug hotels for them, and just getting really into it. And it's just, we found a little moth caterpillar yesterday, and I put it on my finger and walked it over, and he knew exactly like what kind of caterpillar it is. So it's just really neat, like seeing him share with everybody and everyone learn from him, just about all the different bugs that live in our environment at school.
Yeah, that reminds me of several kids I've worked with, and you know, the beautiful thing about that is that kids actually need permission. We all need permission. Parents need permission to give to their kids permission, and the reason I say that is because if kids don't have permission to have that kind of engagement, to have that kind of connection, to actually fall in love with nature and to own that love, then they grow into adults who feel this misalignment when they want to go back to nature, and we're having this mental health crisis that and when you ask an audience, we have some exceptional young people in the audience I know that are in nature connection communities, but when I talk to audiences now and I look out and I see people who are approximately 30 years old and younger, asking them that question about, think of a time when you were a child and you fell in love with nature, there's a lot of blank stares now. And I work with doctoral students at a couple of universities who do their thesis projects with me, and they're all under 30. And it's shocking how many of them say, I didn't have a childhood with nature. I don't have a memory of falling in love with nature. And they're just for the first time now as college students, as doctoral college students in their last year of getting a doctorate, for the first time falling in love with nature. And yet they'll describe anxiety, depression, mental health challenges all throughout their college experience. And this one semester with me, and it literally changes their life, resolves their anxiety, because they have to go through a connective process in order to finish their project. And so, you know, in Wild Inside, I talk about several kids. I share some stories of kids I worked with who had major behavioral challenges in traditional elementary school. And like Sharon was saying earlier, what I did with them was so simple. It was so simple. Because I'm a professional, I can write it into their special education plan that we have to go outside and engage with nature. And of course I can justify all the science behind why we're doing this. But taking them outside and literally just pointing out the birds, being playful, allowing them to explore a tiny patch of garden area once a week for multiple weeks in a row. And teachers being blown away that they're no longer throwing chairs, kicking and hitting and biting. They're no longer, they're asking to go outside when they're upset. I mean, it looks like a miracle, and it is, but really what it is, it's that ecoceptive serve and return. It's a 1,000,000-year-old technology that we carry, And when we reconnect it and we stop fracturing our children and ourselves and give permission for that dirt under the nails instead of go, oh, they've got dirt under their nails. I've seen that a lot. And, you know, and when we allow for that, then that kind of helps them go, like my daughter, you know, no, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do this. Thank goodness for her in my life, you know, and my other daughter. They demanded I pay attention. It was either that or my life was going to be real hard as a parent. You know, I was lucky. I got some strong-willed kids, and so yeah, it's that permission. If I can have you all walk out of here with one thing tonight, it's to leave with the permission to pause and to engage with nature, not just to go to nature, but to engage and to offer that to the children or the teenagers or the other adults in your life. And there are, I you know, kind of at the last minute, I added at the end of every chapter just little things you can do, like, oh, how could you apply this, what I just shared with you in this story? And they're the simplest little tasks. Again, I didn't want to overwhelm anybody or say, oh, here's another, you know, thing you're supposed to do in your day, but this is something you can do on your way to the car. This is something you can do, you know, brushing your teeth, so that you can incorporate it in and remember that it's actually really quite simple, because once you do it once, you go, oh yeah, there's something in here. It's like it starts to scratch at you, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and then you can't ignore it anymore. Anyone?
I had so many stories and so many things when I was hearing you. I was thinking about my own mental health crisis, which began as a child but wasn't really addressed till after, and decisions to pursue farming, which is where Sharon and I met when I was working at Fairview Gardens, and realizing that there was something about that was like really good. But then there was also that desire to control that environment, to really to be productive, to grow food well, and it was beautiful and good. But as I had continued to get older, and now I have 2 young kids, and see that there's something that's really healthy for me, healing for me, about being at their pace, and their pace is so much different. It is not about productivity and outcome. It really isn't.
Yeah.
You know, you start 1,000 projects and never finish it and don't feel bad about it at all. Whereas I'm like, well, you can't start unless you don't finish. And to just see how healing that is. And I also think about, you know, I volunteer at WIP, and we have a group of kids that are really in one of the after school programs that have a lot of energy, and, you know, we're like, it's hard to say hello and introduce ourselves sometimes. We got movement and bodies and sounds and the band, and it's loud, and I have sensory things, so I'm like, oh, it's so loud in this band. And we arrive at Haskell's, and the second we are out there, everyone, including myself, goes, and we're here, and it's beautiful in every aspect of it. Even the kids like, I didn't like the beach, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm gonna take all my clothes off and like be in the water, because it feels good to them. And we were walking back, this was last week, we were walking back, and we noticed there was this trail, 2 little dots in the sand that was kind of squiggling, and everybody gathered around, and we were like, who's making those tracks? And the kids that like are generally just out of their bodies, you know, wiggling with both movement and sound, everybody crouched down, and we're looking, and there's little dots, and then all of a sudden it was and it was a roly-poly at the beach making this little dots, and we all had to follow, and there it was, just wiggling around trying to get there. And it was like a really amazing end to like our time together, when we go from like everybody's getting dropped off, and we're like, they're like, we're gonna wrap you up in rope and pull you around, and then to like, and so there is so much of that, and that's like just an everyday occurrence in being with kids out in nature, and so I continue to learn so much about myself through these kids and seeing how like drastic their lives can, their moods and everything can shift because they're so fluid, and I can be really rigid, and so I just am learning so much.
Yeah, and that rigidity is learned. That's built over time. And I love that you told the story of the tiniest creature, and how we think that nature, these nature experiences have to be like the mountain lion or like the shark or these big outward bound, and it's like, look at that tiny creature capturing the attention of these wily kids, and that's tells you how deep and ancient these experiences are and how necessary they are. When we remove ourselves from these, it doesn't have to be a this or that. Technology is not going away. Modern technology is not going away. We've had technology forever, but but we can't. My grandmother used to say, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater," and so we can't discard a million years of evolution and expect it to go well. So we can do this and that, and that's why organizations like Wilderness Youth Project, and it sounds like your organization and Leah here runs a killer forest preschool as well. Well, she doesn't kill the kids. I'm just kidding. That was a terrible reference. She doesn't do that. A really good one. Why these programs are so essential, because they're going to get technology no matter what we do. It's everywhere. But this isn't anymore. And this is where they get permission, and this is where parents remember to give them permission, and where kids can draw their, if there's a parent or a grandparent here who didn't have the connection, and there will be grief in that, but allow your child or your grandchild to invite you into it now. It's never too late. Once you experience that little roly-poly at the beach, you'll never forget it, and you'll want more and more, because it's in there. Yeah, thank you for that story. I love it. I will probably tell that. I'll borrow that story.
How about one more share?
Share or question or.
I'm Alyssa, mom of Zuri and Harper, both of whom have been at WIP for a number of years, and Seaweed. Both of whom were in a forest kindergarten for many years also. I loved what you read. I'm excited to read the whole thing, and many threads of parts of our life that resonated a lot, just with what you read already. But I'm thinking of two stories. One sort of a little similar to the roly-poly, but my son, who evoked some analogous feelings to what you were sharing about your young daughter. We were out on a hike to this secret to us during COVID that we had found, that we were like, nobody else will come here, we can go. And we were walking, and the whole thing sort of lovely through the woods to get to the beach, and our son said, "Oh, look, there's a tick." And he had found literally on the blade of a grass this like the tip of a needle-sized tick perched on the tip of a blade of grass, which was like very much like what he does. He just has this like incredible way to observe and to hone in, and that just has stuck with me. It's like the ability to pay attention and to see the world at all scales. I'm a mindfulness teacher, and so like even this blows me away that like the presence of children, even when very much embedded in my life as an adult, is this cultivation of and practice of presence, is like, this is next level, like different universe of presence. And then the other story I was thinking about, dirt under the fingernails. My kiddos went to a forest school in the Pacific Northwest for the year that followed that year of COVID, sort of after that beach experience. and we're out in the Pacific Northwest forest for that year, and was magical in all ways, but the winter months were cold and wet and muddy, and I would like rush to pick them up, and in the winter it's dark by the time they're getting picked up, and I'd have like hot chocolate in the car and towels, and like, let's go get in the tub, you guys must be freezing. And we'd find all these little ones in the forest in like their second or third change of clothes, completely unidentifiable because they're like head to toe in mud, not wearing the clothes they went to, but even if they were, just all brown and masked, even though it was outside because it was COVID, so you just could see like this amount of them and mud. And I'd be like, okay, are you ready to go home? And they're like, no, can't you see we're busy? And they'd be like 8 hours into being in the mud, in the freezing, in the pouring rain, and just like not even thinking about hot chocolate or warm baths or a change of clothes, just like, this is the most wonderful thing we could think of doing, and why would we leave? It also made me think of that with the dirt under the fingernails.
Thank you for sharing those stories. Yeah, you don't really need to work hard to motivate kids outside. if you've allowed it to be familiar, and that's the key. You know, I do get asked, how do I get the kids to go outside? They don't want to go outside. And that's often, it's not because they don't like it or they don't want to, it's because it's unfamiliar. Because the brain wants what's familiar, whether that's healthy or unhealthy. That's a whole workshop in and of itself. Yeah, I do just want to point out, in case you all didn't notice, that child that everyone tried to tell me was going to turn out, you know, in these awful ways because I was coddling her and loving her too much. She's a pretty great human being over there, and she does quite well for herself. So, yeah. So feel free to connect with her after. Were there any questions that were burning for anybody? It sounds like we're out of time, but any burning questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I have a question. When you were mentioning, like, think of a time that you connected with nature, I didn't have that memory, because I grew up like in a city, in like my mom telling me, don't get on the floor. I used to dress white dresses, so I could not get dirty. So now that I have my daughters, and they are going to whip, and they are getting dirty and everything, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I can take off my shoes too. So I'm like connecting with her in nature, and her first time is being like amazing. So I think my question is, how or what would you recommend for me, for example, to start connecting with her, or to like I want her to go deep in nature. So I want to be careful of putting my vision or like my, oh, don't do this, into her. I'm right now trying to follow her lead. It's like, oh, let's run here. Oh, let's just throw dirt. Yeah.
I wrote Wild Inside for you.
Perfect.
Like I said, at the end of every chapter, I do give just a little activity to link some of the science and some of the reasons why you would want to give your kid permission, but also just to kind of calm your own anxiety that you might have around, ooh, should I let them do that? You know, because you know, it's not your fault that you didn't grow up with that connection, but it's not too late to do it. So yeah, I think that you could probably I think it's a good place to start to kind of learn kind of not just the joy that your child's having, but why that's so important, and then how to take it one step further with her, you know, how to expand on her joy a little bit and offer her something as well. So, yeah.
And your book's got journal prompts too. You've got activities and journal prompts at the end of
Thank
every
you.
chapter. So that can allow like you as parents, as grandparents, as educators to dig deeper in your own stuff.
It sounds like it's good book club.
Yeah,
Prepared.
it is actually. I've heard from a few people, and
Want to co-host with me?
and if you're a grandparent, I have to say that one of my favorite pieces of feedback I've gotten is I've gotten calls from grandmothers, and they've said, I'm gonna be a better grandmother after reading that, and that's something I did not expect. So that's a sweet little something if you're a grandparent here. So yeah, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you Chaucers for having us, and for Sharon and Wilderness Youth Project and Lauren for organizing this, and for all of you for coming out on a Wednesday night, and Veda for coming with me and being my ride or die.
Kathleen, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing Wild Inside with us. Kathleen Lockyer.